Hi everyone, my name is Maverick. Today I'm going to take you through a short practice. And just before we begin, I would like to bring awareness to a pelvic pattern that some of us, or most of us, may already be familiar with. So technically it is called the anterior pelvic tilt. I'll just call it the archback for easy reference. Or the posterior pelvic tilt, which I'll just call the flat back. So what we try to adopt in our physical practice or in our daily life is a neutral spine, whereby we are not tilting the pelvis forward too much or slumping too much. Now, this being an alignment-based class, I would like to um, emphasize a little bit more on what we mean by alignment. Now, we are not trying to align a pose. We're trying to align the body so that regardless of your flexibility, regardless of how mobile your joints are, we work in accordance to what your body allows. So making reference to a series of classical or traditional poses that you may already be familiar with, I'm going to start with what is commonly called Warrior One. Sometimes we are told that the back heel should be aligned with the front heel. Now this sometimes creates a lot of instability in our lower back. And if we are already having lower back issue, this is the last position we want to be in. So I will create a broader base. So if you can see from the front, I would want to encourage my hips to be forward facing. Therefore, again, I stress the back heel is not in line with the front heel. So if you were to see me from the side, I deliberately have my shoulders slightly forward, kind of ahead of the hip, rather than arch back and totally exploding at the front of the body. So I have my navel drawn in towards my spine, and when I lift my arms, I keep my spine neutral as much as I can, and my chin is low. And I want to encourage plenty of space between shoulder and the side of the neck. Okay, now moving on to the next posture. So a lot of times when we come to a posture that they call the intense side stretch, so I'll show you from the side profile, whereby we are asked to fall forward with hands on the floor. So assuming I have limitation, when I fall forward, say this is as far as I can go, I keep my knee a little soft, I will perceive this as an intention to work on strengthening the back rather than trying to stretch the hamstring. Now, say if you look at it from another perspective, what if I intend to stretch my hamstring? Now, before that can happen, I need to encourage movement from the pelvis that then allows my spine to literally drip over or sink towards gravity, and then the rest can happen. Of course, then there's always the question of, is there a possible safer way to stretch the hamstring? So if you were to see me from the front, and I fall forward with all good intention, you might sometimes still see that one side of my lower back could be higher than the other side. So right now, if I allow my upper body to drip over with intention to possibly create length in the spine, and probably will feel quite a bit along the spine. Okay. Moving on to the next pose. A lot of times when we are asked to stand on one leg, that is, one foot is on the floor and the other one is up, there is a tendency for the pelvis to tilt without us noticing. So we could have a knee up and the other pelvis is going a little bit off. So what is important to take note that what is important to take note is when we are standing on one leg, we want to have a conscious effort to keep both the left and the right side of the pelvis stable. So if I lift my heel off the ground and then the knee up, I want to make sure that the supporting foot, which is my left foot right now, is pressing into the floor, while the knee, the opposite knee, is moving up. Or if I were to push my knee into my hands, inviting my shoulders to roll back, to this structure, I invite a little contraction to the abdomen to contain the energy of the pelvis to stay stable. And of course, you can take another version whereby the other leg is extended. So the foot is pushing into the hand. Let me show you from this angle. So the foot is pushing into the hand, drawing my upper body forward, keeping the shoulders forward facing. Okay, let's move on to the next pose. Now, a forward bend, a seemingly simple looking pose, can sometimes be a little bit underrated, and a lot of us end up just collapsing towards the floor. So if you recall earlier when I mentioned about the tendency to arch our back too much or kind of drop the tailbone too much, this will manifest especially in a pose like a forward fold. So if I arch my back a lot, then when I fold forward, and if I were to insist on keeping my legs straight, then this can happen, right? And then this can sometimes add a lot of stress on my lumbar area. Now, this gets worse if I happen to be hypermobile, and I will never know when to stop pushing before something negative happens. Then, if I happen to have a very stiff back, then I probably will sense that there is not much movement at the pelvis at all, and I'm kind of stuck. So by bending the knee, this creates a slack at the hamstrings, allow my pelvis to tilt, allow my spine to gravitate towards the floor. Likewise, when I'm coming back, I keep my back safe. I lift not from the neck, I lift the chest. I come up slow. Okay, let's move on to the next pose. Now, all the past few postures that we've been exploring, you probably will notice that our hips were forward facing. Now, there's also the other orientation that is always associated with Warrior 2. So again, if you see me from this angle, I hope I'm still in frame. Okay. Now, some people may insist that the knee of the bent leg must be at 90 degrees. Now the question is why? So if this is as much, or if this is as far as I can go, this is where I'll stay. Now, again, the habits may come in. So if I happen to arch my back quite a bit, then my upper body tends to collapse. And this can create a lot of discomfort when I'm still trying to stabilize the upper body. So we want to make sure again that we try to keep the spine neutral. Okay. Now from this perspective, if I were to change right now to the other side, you can notice that there wasn't much movement in so-called the upper part of the body. I wasn't moving the spine, right? It's much more a pelvic movement. So this angle now, I want to feel as if that my pelvis are sinking straight down towards the earth rather than forward movement. So if I extend my arm straight up, it is not just about lifting the arm, it's an extension of the energy from the side of the body all the way up. Now when I release my arms, likewise it is not just a movement of the wrist, it is a movement, a rotation of the upper arm via shoulder joint, and it involves the scapula, the shoulder blade. Okay, let's move on to the next pose. All of us are familiar with what they call the triangle pose. Now this is an interesting posture because a lot of us associate the triangle pose with stretching the hamstrings. So I would offer you this space to consider. Is it just about stretching the hamstrings, or can it also stimulate other parts of the body that we tend to underrate, like a blind spot? So again, seeing me from this profile. Now if I were to try to gain access into the hip, I may want to question what is getting in the way. Assuming my hamstrings are very, very tight, I would bend my knee just a little bit. And this would give you the clue that at this point, my focus is not so much on stretching the hamstring. I first want to gain access into the hip. And my body says this is as much as I can go. So from here, when my pelvis is stable, I reassess, am I able to straighten my leg? Okay. So I can comfortably straighten my leg, and if I release the hand, in this case my right hand, where would I place my hand so that I stay comfortable and stable? A reminder here is try to refrain from locking the knee. So from this position, if my top shoulder rolls back, does it give me space to then extend the energy upwards towards the ceiling, towards the sky? So it is not a collapse towards ground, but more of an elevation towards the top. Now, of course, we have all the other variation of taking the arm overhead, looking up, looking down. Now, whatever the variation, the question is, what is the primary focus and what are the secondary focus? So we look at it from the other angle now. What if right now, when I fall from the hip, again taking my restrictions into consideration, say this is as far as I can go. Or maybe for this side, I can go much further, bending the knee when necessary. Okay. And sometimes we are told that we want to keep both sides of the body parallel to each other. What if we try another approach, whereby we give a little bit of a lateral flexion of the spine? How would that affect the experience? Arm overhead, straight up, head up, or turn to look down. So not so much of right or wrong, but they all offer you different experience. Let's move on to the next pose. So again, another seemingly simple, easy pose is the chair pose. Okay, again making reference to our habitual pelvic pattern. So if we have a tendency to arch the back a lot, then the chair pose can take an awkward angle whereby there is so much tension in the lower back, and then we are trying to keep the arms strong, and then there's a lot of tension building up on the side of the neck, which is counterproductive. Likewise, if I have very, I would call it lazy core energy, then I tend to slump. So with this, my chair pose would probably look like this. Yeah. So again, we try to keep the spine neutral, and we don't have to go very low. So if I start from this manageable angle for me, and I release my arm, is this more manageable? Of course, I'll still feel a certain degree of challenge, but it is not stressing me, and my body is not crying out for help. Okay, let's move on to the next pose. Now, I'm going to play with a little bit with spinal rotation, and through a pose that is commonly known as the revolved triangle, reverse triangle, whichever way you want to label it. Now, here I want to stress that this position or this pose is first a forward fold followed by a rotation of the spine. Now, if you were to stand in this position like what I'm doing now, even before you fold, and if you play a little bit with rotation, you can sense that the lumbar area, the lowest part of the spine, doesn't actually give you much space to rotate. But instead, if you move up a little bit, then you notice that it is the thoracic region that gives a little bit more space to rotate. So assuming when we fall forward, without locking the knee, when we fall forward, so the pelvis stays stable. Let me make a bit of adjustment. The pelvis stays stable. And then next question would be, am I able to gain access to the floor? What if I bend my knee? Okay, so my pelvis stays stable. Am I able to cross over safely? Okay. Am I still able to create space by creating a length of energy all the way from the thumb side across the chest, reaching up? Okay. Now, what if I have limitation in the rotation of my spine? Which means when I fix my pelvis, I find that I cannot move, I cannot rotate at all. Then am I willing to allow some movement from the pelvis? Which means when you allow the pelvis to follow the rotation of the spine, this movement is now a little bit up from the hip, a little bit from the spine. Not so much of right or wrong, but what does your body allow? So I hope you can see, because it's a very micro movement. Oh, let me switch my leg. Okay, so if I were in this position now, and I fall forward, and maybe even at this point I can really sense that I'm not going to make it if I try to fix my pelvis and rotate my spine. So am I willing to allow my pelvis, in this case my right pelvis, to move a little bit? You can't see probably, but can you visualize that the pelvis will move a little bit, and this gives me a little bit more space to create a rotation via the hip joint, right side, and also thoracic spine. Again, the other option of looking up, and maybe the not so common arm overhead. Okay, and then come up safely. Step forward. Okay, I'm in frame again. Okay, what else have we not covered? Okay, now what is commonly known as a twisting lunge? I somehow find the word twisting very painful. Commonly done this way. I would like to call it a rotation of the spine in the lunge movement. Okay, now what can get in the way in this pose a lot of time is the piriformis. So I will deliberately use left or right hand, create resistance between my hand and the knee. You see that the knee is moving away, or rather moving towards the midline. So there's resistance. There's no movement, just engagement. And I want to sense whether I actually feel a lot of contraction that is going on my piriformis. And then I let it go. Then I play this movement a few more times. This isn't exactly a very pleasant sensation, but you shouldn't be in pain. Okay, take it that I now receive the signal from the body that she is willing to take me in. So I'm going to cross over from here. Okay, when I have contact between my elbow and the outside knee, I'm using this as a leverage to open up the chest. No strain. When the heels of my palm touch, I press together actively. Elbows are lifting actively. Then I release, come back. What if the back leg is straight? So let's try the other option. Likewise, I attempt to release the piriformis, this time on the left side. Okay, now, another way to enter this pose, I invite a lot of length to the side of the body. I keep reaching up. Even as I'm crossing over, I'm creating the length. Take my time. Okay, let the chest open up. Heel of the palm will touch. Elbows are active. So the front foot will press heavily into the floor. The ball of my back foot will press into the floor as if I'm going to sprint forward. Exhale. Inhale, lift. So here you want to have a little subtle awareness that the buttock of the side of the straight leg is lifting just a little bit. And then come back. Okay. I'm running out of time, so I'm going to take a sit. Okay. Now that's all for today. I hope you found something useful in the practice today, and I'll see you when I see you. Thank you. Good day.